Welcome back, Sebastian here. So, time for my review for the Formula 2 feature race from Zandvoort. And what a chaotic race that was. So let's get started right away. So, it was dry conditions, but the track was wet. It had rained earlier in the day. So, pretty tricky conditions to start the race though. Crawford started on pole with Hauger second alongside. Right away, we have absolute chaos at the start. Doohan doesn't even get to the line. He basically spun on the final corner, hit a damp patch, and then trying to get the car out, he basically got the car stuck, so he didn't even take the start officially. And we got chaos at turn one with Cordial getting tapped by Behrman and Vesti basically spinning on its own at turn one. So absolute chaos there, really, really difficult conditions for the drivers. And that brings out the safety car right away. After a very short safety car to deal with Doohan's car, Iwasa and Maini collide at turn one. So Iwasa tries to go for an overtake. However, at this point, the racing line has already started to form on the track. So there's really only one line that you can drive on, and he finds this out when he basically just understeers and takes out Maini's front wing. They both go off at turn one, but they were able to continue. A couple laps later, it was announced that both Cordial and Iwasa were given a 10-second penalties for their respective collisions. So tough penalties for both drivers. Lap 7, this is when the leaders start to pit. However, there was an issue with the timing tower on the official world feed for Formula 2. And so the drivers' positions would only update once a lap. So it was very, very difficult to figure out what positions drivers were in, especially around the safety car period. And this will be relevant later. But leaders started to pit. I believe Maloney was the first of the leaders to pit, and then he was followed by Crawford and Hauger the next lap. Pourchaire and Hadjar stay out until the following lap, but they make that overtake work and they come out in the lead. So at this point, it seems like Pourchaire basically came out in the net lead, but he promptly crashes, drives on a wet patch, and had a very, very heavy collision at turn 7. Turn 7, I believe. Just kind of loses control of the car, locks his brakes up, and then just kind of skips across the gravel and into the barrier. Medical car was deployed. He looked like he was kind of clutching his ribs or something, but hopefully he's all right. And a really, really unusual incident. So we got a safety car because of Pourchaire's crash, and everyone else basically pits because it's perfect timing because of the safety car. Vesti is the second Prema car behind his teammate Behrman, and he basically goes out on his outlap after his pit stops, and his tires fall off. So just magically, between turns 6 and 7, I believe, the tires just fall off the car, go rolling off down the road, and he's basically stranded, cursing on the radio, and I think quite rightly, about how he has no tires anymore. So that was very unusual, very odd to see two tires go off at once like that. But yeah, unfortunate for Vesti, although he had made that mistake earlier in the race. But because, Doohan's out, Iwasa 10-second penalty, Pourchaire's out, it was a great opportunity for him to really make a move in the championship, but he's not able to do so. So we get another safety car because of that. And lap 13, so in kind of the middle of the safety car period, because it was quite a lengthy safety car, Novalak had somehow ended up in P1, and I don't think anyone really has any idea how it happened. At first, I thought that he was started on the medium tires, but then it doesn't seem like that was the case. Crawford was P2 as well after the safety car, and at this point, very, very tricky conditions, but at this point, the track is pretty dry. Lap 17, Behrman, right after the safety car finishes, Behrman and Martins collide at turn 3. I thought it was closer to a 50-50 collision. I thought the penalty on Martins was a bit harsh. Behrman a couple of corners earlier had basically cut off Martins in almost a very similar fashion. Turn 3, basically similar move, except this time Martins basically makes contact with Behrman. That being said, basically didn't give him any room. So, I do think it's a fair penalty, but was a bit harsh given that the same thing had basically happened to him a couple corners earlier. This point, Daruvala and Boschung are both given 5-second penalties for a safety car infringement. Was not sure what exactly that was. Wasn't showed on the feed. Lap 24, and then at this point, this is kind of where all the chaos and stuff kind of ended, and we kind of got into the race proper. But I think it's an unfortunate characteristic of these kind of wet to dry races, especially with Formula 2 where the races aren't really that long, is that even though the track's drying out, you basically have your dry line and everywhere around that is extremely wet, extremely slippery, and is almost impossible to make an overtake. But Cordia was putting pressure on Nissany for P10 just to show that Nissany was somehow in the points at one point after all this chaos. And because of the safety cars, we eventually switched to a timed race. So that's where here it's basically, instead of counting up for laps, it switches to counting down. So with 14 minutes to go, Martins received that 10-second penalty that I told you about. And this is finally when the timing tower got fixed. So for the first basically 25, 30 laps of the race or so, we could only see the position and only updated when they crossed the start-finish line. So we didn't see any of the gaps. We didn't see what tires drivers were on. And yeah, just really difficult to follow what was going on. Even the commentators didn't really have any idea. 5 minutes ago, Crawford was putting pressure on Maloney at this point, and Novalak, how I kind of had questions about whether Novalak would be able to have the pace to stay in P1, but he made it work. He made it look pretty good, and he was able to kind of hold a lead and be pretty comfortable in it. Final minute, Iwasa overtakes Bosching for P14 at turn 1. Final lap of the race, Iwasa overtakes Leclerc for P13, and Novalak takes a checkered flag. Absolute shock win, first win for him in Formula 2, starting from P13 on the grid as well. So great win for him. A massive chunk of luck involved, but you have to kind of be there and keep the car on the road, as some very, very talented drivers that were not able to do so today. So just taking a look at the final result, Novalak first, second Maloney, third Crawford, fourth Versure, fifth Hauger, sixth Hadjar, seventh Fittipaldi, eighth Cordial, first points of the season for him, ninth Martins, dropping down from fifth after that penalty, 10th Cordial, 10th Correa, 11th Stanek, 12th Nissany, 13th Iwasa, 14th Leclerc, 15th Boschung, 16th Mason, 17th Daruvula, 18th Miney, and then your four DNFs, your four retirements, Behrman, Besti, Porsche, and Doohan. So interestingly enough, basically 5 of the top 7 drivers in the championship get no points. So, and since there was no points yesterday from the sprint race, it was effectively almost a completely worthless, useless weekend for basically almost all of the championship contenders. So taking a look at the championship, the tops hasn't really changed at all. Porsche 168 points, still has a 12-point lead. I think he's very fortunate with everything that went on, both yesterday and today, that he still has that 12-point lead. But he'll take it with 2 rounds remaining. Monza next week, and then Abu Dhabi all the way at the end of the season. Second Besti 156 points, third Iwasa 134, fourth Doohan 130. 5th Martins 122, 6th Fittipaldi 104, 7th Behrman 102, 8th Versure 96, 9th Maloney also with 96, 10th Hauger 92, 11th Crawford with 56, tied with Miney in 12th, 13th Daruvilla with 56, 14th Hadjar with 47, 15th Leclerc with 39, 16th Boschung with 35, moving up all the way to 17th. With this win today, Novalak with 28 points, 18th was Correa with 13, 19th is Stanek also with 13. Cordial, like I said, first points of the season, 20th with 4, and then Nissany, Benavides, and Mason with no points. Today was a very tricky race, and I forgot to mention at the start, but I'll just mention it now. But some of the drivers basically decided to switch onto the wet tires after the opening laps just to see if in case it rained, and it was mostly drivers who were right at the end. But the start of the race was a bit sketchy with tires, especially on outlaps as well after the pit stop. So very, very tricky conditions today, and those who finished at the top were rewarded pretty well. And a lot of very, very talented drivers who did not finish today's race. So interesting race nonetheless, but we move on to Monza next week. And of course, I'll be reviewing the Dutch Grand Prix in about, 3 or 4 hours time when that hopefully finishes. So yes, thanks so much for watching, and goodbye.